Hi, Perteet. Thanks for joining us on the Z Talks podcast today. And we look forward to talk to you about AYO Foods.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here with you.
Awesome. So, this was a particularly exciting episode for me because I know that your product is all around West African food. And with me being half Nigerian, I was really excited to hear about your product and learn what got you started in this field, in this area.
Well, I'm half Liberian, so grew up eating a ton of incredible West African food and married someone who had a tremendous appreciation for that food. And so the idea for IO came up just over our kind of dinner table several years ago. But at the time, we didn't know if kind of the mainstream market was ready for the bold flavors of West Africa. I grew up in kind of the food industry. So prior to starting this company, had extensive food experience, both in kind of big CPG where I worked at General Mills, but also on the syndicated data side. And so I saw kind of the market evolve over time. And I'd say really in the last 3 to 4 years, there's been just a broad market shift, really surrounding kind of the growth of global flavors. Yet our food was just not existent in the broader landscape. And so, we started working on IO about 3 years ago. We took all the extra money that we would have coming in and sent it straight out to kind of partner with product developers and brand agencies and partners to really see if we could make West African flavors take flight on a broader scale. And so we launched in July of 2020 in about 50 Whole Foods stores after sending samples out to just about every retailer that we knew, kind of hand packed in a lab. Whole Foods graciously said yes, and we were so excited to partner with them as our first retail partner. And we've since expanded to over 4,000 doors across the country, with many more to come this year. So it's just one, it's been such an incredible journey, but one that's been a tremendous source of pride for us. We very much view IO as an invitation into our home, and IO actually translates to joy. So it's been kind of a great joy of ours to be able to bring this platform to life.
Wow, it almost seems, and I know it's been a lot of hard work and blood and sweat and tears, but it almost seems like an overnight success. You went in 2020 to zero to 2022 to over 4,000 stores. Is that normal, or is that something you guys, work towards and you just got in, we're at the right place at the right time?
Yeah, I'd say our journey is one that typically isn't the norm, but one that certainly wasn't overnight. I think oftentimes today, like, the entrepreneurship journeys are very glamorized, and we've had some great moments which we're incredibly proud of, but no one sees my 7 a.m. runs to FedEx or any of that, getting samples out. And we operate a lean team, so while we get the glory of all of the fun things like this, there's a lot of hard work that goes behind the scenes. I think a big piece of our scale so quickly was attributable to the fact that we kind of built this business with the intention of scaling it. And so and that was, I can only attribute that to, playing to your strengths, and the fact that that was the type of businesses that we knew how to build. We both came from kind of the corporate sector, and having come from General Mills, we built products to really appeal to really reach broad audiences. And so when we built IO, it was always this vision that it would kind of grow to that type of scale. And so early on, we went straight to co-manufacturers versus producing in commercial kitchens. We reached out to a breadth of retailers, really targeting scale. And so I think our approach going in enabled us to kind of scale quickly in that way. I think the other piece is, in some ways, the pandemic probably accelerated our trajectory, and that people were just tired of the kind of same old, and looking to experience something else from the comfort of their homes. And so for us, if we can provide high quality, easy to prepare flavors that will kind of blow your mind a little bit. We were hitting kind of a unique sweet spot in the market. And one of the things that we're most proud of is, often when people warm up our dishes or we sample our dishes at trade shows, one of the most frequent comments is like, "Oh, this is like how does this come? Like is this already prepared or what is it?" And like people just don't really believe it's frozen food. And so to be able to do something like that in a space that didn't exist, we're super proud of.
Wow. That's all I can say is wow. So many questions. One of the questions that I had is I did hear that CPG soared during the pandemic. Was it just that people were eating more or they were at home, so they weren't eating out? That's probably why they weren't eating out like during lunch and things like that as often as they would be if they were out. And so they were buying more products and eating them in homes. Is that why? Do you know?
Yeah, I mean, as especially as you reflect on like the early days of the pandemic, like I think there was a broad intersection of the public who wasn't eating out at all, either because restaurants were closed or because there was so much uncertainty in the environment. Like you didn't know, like a lot of people were kind of hoarding their resources and with the a potential risk that the market might not look the same, or there's job insecurity, all of those things. I think the other thing is in times that are particularly stressful or unknown, people seek comfort and the comfort of home. And so I think people reverted a lot back to kind of home cooking because one, they were at home, but two, food can be such a source of comfort. And so think people were actively looking at, we didn't make sourdough, which I know there are gazillion sourdough challenges, but, we made fresh bread. We made the dishes that I grew up with. We made all of those things because we had the time. Like I could let a pot simmer while I was on calls and things like that. And so I think there was this kind of reversion back to the basics in the thick of the pandemic. And we feel like we've hit an interesting sweet spot, which is really an evolution out of the pandemic, which is kind of combining kind of that chef curated goodness with the comfort of home. And so, early in the pandemic, we saw that many kind of restaurant folks were kind of taking on new roles and stretching their business, how they thought about their businesses differently. And, through that, we connected with Chef Ajapong, who launched two dishes with us late last year. We're onboarding our second chef now, who's Zoe Ajonio. So we're incredibly excited about her joining the family. And this idea that, like, frozen food doesn't have to be subpar or less than. You can actually bring really great quality through the process of frozen to the aisles of mainstream grocery. And so we're not cutting any corners. We're taking all fresh ingredients. We're slow cooking everything. And then we're just like we're packing it at the peak of perfection so that other people can enjoy it, and it's a little bit easier to get there.
Yeah, so it's super fresh and it's good. Like you said, people are looking for different options in the freezer aisle. Also, there's so many trends going on. So it started with COVID and now we have inflation. So I'm sure a lot of people are trying to save money, but they still want to have healthy and delicious meals. And so it seems like you're primed for all of these opportunities. So that's great.
Yeah, well, we hope so.
Yeah, and you also had the odds a little bit stacked in your favor because you had the data knowledge by working. I believe you worked at Nielsen, and you mentioned both your husband and yourself were from corporate America. So I'm sure able to take a lot of your experience, and that helped you to get over some of those humps. Do you feel that was the case?
Yeah, absolutely. So I worked at Spins, which has a unique view of kind of the health and wellness space. And I think that view kind of highlighted the trends as they were happening kind of real time. And so what's interesting is Frozen certainly peaked during the pandemic, but even the 3 to 4 years prior to the pandemic, Frozen was steadily outpacing center of store, refrigerated perimeter, really driven by these like more global premium flavors that were displacing kind of legacy brands in the space. Now, I think the pandemic certainly accelerated that, but that view kind of showed us that premium brands, more global flavors could be successful in grocery. Now, it did not tell us that West African flavors should be where we should focus. In fact, it told us like the opposite of that, right? Which is like there was zero market, so there was no growth, there was no history or any of that. But we felt like it was a risk worth taking and a story that was worth telling. And so our hunch was that if people were accepting of other global flavors, they would be equally excited and encouraged to try IO.
So you mentioned a couple of things earlier. You mentioned that you were building the company to scale, and then you also mentioned you were building it to appeal to broad audiences. So two questions there. The first question is, are you looking to build it to scale to sell it to an investor or another CPG? And then the second question is, are you reaching that broad audience right now with IO, or is it over indexing for a particular ethnicity?
Yeah, so great questions. I will say on the first question, like we will see where this journey takes us. I think for us it was very much about building something that we owned, and creating a legacy brand that our children could relish in the success of. And so, we'll see kind of where this journey takes us. Right now, our 8-year-old is very invested in being the CEO. Uh, so that could guide us in a certain direction. For us, it's about building a brand that's here in 50 years or 100 years. And so, or longer. And so we'll see kind of where that road takes us and kind of the path to getting there. And then I'm sorry, remind me of the second part of the question.
So you mentioned that you were building it to appeal to a broad audience. So are you seeing that, or is it over indexing for a certain ethnicity?
Yeah. So, we launched IO very much with the premise that the flavors of Africa, the flavors of West Africa, shouldn't be relegated to one section in the store, but really celebrated across the store. And so, in that, we wanted to kind of create the recipes the right way, the way we would enjoy them at home. But we also wanted to create a brand that was welcoming and an invitation into kind of our home for all consumers. And so I think as we've launched, we've seen that play out in terms of the consumer adoption, that there are certainly kind of folks who look like me, who have my story, who are looking for the flavors that they of home, the flavors that were so graciously made for them, but without the hassle or the fuss of that. But we're seeing a lot of people who have never tried West African flavors being really excited about what we're offering. And it's been fun to see the reactions by those folks. Because what I often remind people is, we're representing 17 different countries. And so it's like I've heard people say, like, oh, I don't like spicy food. And it's like, well, all West African food is not spicy, right? What we've highlighted is the commonality tends to be it's fresh, slower cooked, layered flavors, always made with care and love. But that's really about the only commonality. So it's been fun to introduce people to these flavors where they don't know quite what to expect, but they're always pleasantly surprised. And we hope this creates a pathway not only for IO, but for other of the many like incredible West African brands in this space to thrive and grow their items with a broader audience.
Hmm. And so are there other West African companies and products in the space?
Yeah, so not really in frozen, in the specific place that we were in, but I'd say there's a host of like really incredible emerging brands in this space that also have like beautiful stories to tell. So you have brands like Yoleli or Berry Bissap or Pock Spices, all of these brands who are really bringing the breadth of West Africa to more people. And so, yes, there are a lot more brands, and we hope that our path kind of creates more opportunities for those incredible founders to reach broader audiences as well.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna have to get a list of those companies and invite them to the Z Talks podcast,
Oh,
and
we
just
have.
to network with them in general.
Yes, yes, I'd love to get you a list. We've got a list of probably about 30 brands.
Awesome, yeah.
We regularly keep in touch, and they're
Mm-hmm.
all like really, really incredible. And so we'd love to get you connected with them.
Awesome, yeah. That's a follow up for sure. So you talked a little bit about the flavors that are in your dishes. For people that haven't had West African food, how would you describe the flavors, and why would just someone that hasn't had West African food try it?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of reasons. I think first, one of the unique things about West African food is it is consistently these like really fresh, slow cooked, layered flavors. And so I think what that creates is dishes that are like really bold and strong in their flavor profiles, like in the absolute best way. And so I think about a dish like Chef Eric's chicken yassa that he's created for us. And it's like this really richness and depth of flavor. My 8-year-old eats it like most days for her after school snack. But, from the caramelized onions to the chicken that gets marinated overnight to that lemon and Dijon, it's just like a bit of an explosion of flavor in your mouth and like in the best possible way. And while every dish doesn't taste the same, in fact, they're very different. I'd say consistently there's this like surprise and delight about like the boldness and richness of the flavors. But above and beyond just like really incredible flavors, I think the other story that is probably even less told is that there are a lot of like really incredible ingredients that come from the West African diaspora that really are incredibly nutrient dense. Often they're upcycled and have a ton of potential across like a broader market. So like if you look at a dish like a goosey, which features the goosey seeds, right? Like a goosey seeds are incredibly rich in protein. They have all the right fats. You look at the wache leaves that we use in our wache, those are incredibly rich in antioxidants. And so, above and beyond like these bold flavors, the dishes are actually incredibly nutrient dense. Like we're about to launch an item that has 38 grams of protein. And I'm like, tell me any other item in frozen that has 38 grams of protein and is like so incredibly delicious, and I'll wait. So I think those two reasons for sure. And then I think the third would be that eating this food can have an immense impact on the economic livelihood of folks in West Africa. And so if we can increase the amount of agusi people are eating, or the amount of cassava people are eating, or the amount of wache people are eating, we will surge demand for those crops that are many of them which are native to West Africa. And in doing so, like increase economic enrichment for communities. And so a lot of what we're trying to do with AYO is create scalable demand for these crops and ingredients. So in turn, we're creating economic opportunities for these communities to create long-term generational wealth. And we've seen that play out relatively quickly, which gets me incredibly excited and energized about our potential for the future. And so, about 4 to 5 months into our journey, we invested in about 15 acres of farmland in Monrovia, Liberia, in partnership with an organization called Girl Power Africa, whose premise is really creating economic growth for women who were victims of civil war and Ebola in Liberia. And already we've created 2 homes on that land. We're already seeing the crop yield. And that crop yield is actually going directly to the women as seed capital for businesses. And so that's a small example. And we're still young, we're only 18 months in. But I'm like, if we can have the impact that we're hoping to have, we can actually like change lives just by eating a more diverse palette of food, which is really, really exciting and energizing to me.
Wow, it's energizing to me as well. there's so much story to tell about the economic and the fact that it's nutrition dense that I'm sure a lot of people didn't know. So I'm glad you shared that story. And then are you saying that you're donating a certain percentage of your profits back to Africa? Is that how you bought the land?
We made a direct investment in that, or so it's not a percent of we made a direct investment and are committed to that organization long term. So we're in year two of that partnership where we're continuing to invest in that partnership. Our goal is to do that not only with Girl Power Africa, but organizations who are on a similar mission. And so we started what we call the Moon Boy Project. So Moon Boy translates to prosperity in Pele, which is my dad's tribe, really with the goal of like enriching the communities who inspired our brand. So it's very, very much a part of our DNA. And so I think the Moon Boy is one example, but something that we live by. I think the other piece is increasingly we're partnering with farmers in West Africa to source our ingredients, etc., as a way to provide direct investment into those communities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome, and in the fact that it's awesome, and then also that you can also point to the fact that you're doing good. It's not just for profit. You're actually making an impact on the world. You're doing good. So I commend you for that, and I also am going to look for opportunities to do that as well with my company and the companies that I found in the future. Let's move on to talk about your SKUs. How many SKUs do you have for AYO Foods?
Yeah, so we started with 3 frozen items. As of next week, we'll be at 9. So we're at 6 today, and then we're adding 3 more, so 9 frozen. And then our vision was always to bring West African flavors across the store. So frozen was a starting point, but we started to action that late last year with the launch of our pepper sauces. So we do like a Liberian pepper sauce and a shito sauce, which are in the midst of expanding to retailers across the country now.
And talk to me about e-commerce. Are you doing a lot with e-commerce now?
We're doing quite a bit more than we have in the past. It's what's interesting about ecom for us is we're frozen, and so everything gets shipped dry ice overnight. And so you're typically buying like a 6 pack or a 12 pack of IO. So it ends up being like our biggest fans are using ecom, which as people experience the brand, we're getting more and more of those folks in. But really look to ecom as a way to provide a deeper, more experiential kind of taste of IO. So very excited about kind of what's to come on that front as we grow.
One question that I have, I'm sure some other people might have, is there's a lot of need for social justice and economic justice in the United States. So, why do you think it's so important to support Africa and grow their economics? I know it's incredibly important, but I know some people are going to say, "Well, what about what about us in the U.S.?" So, can you answer that question?
Well, I think when we built IO, it was very much about like for me, we wouldn't be doing the brand or our community justice if we took the richness of the brand and didn't give back to those communities. And so that was a core central part of our DNA. That being said, we are Black in America. And so, we have an obligation to enrich those communities as well. And I'd say on that front, I think a few things. One, through the Moon Boy Project, we will do domestic USA work as well. Like we're just getting started. And so, because we're partnering with organizations in Africa, does not mean that we're not equally committed to enriching our communities here in the States. I think the other way that we do that is job and wealth creation for our factories, our